Hello everybody and welcome back to another ship review episode, and today I will be reviewing this premium tier 6 Russian cruiser, the Molotov. I'll be looking at her strengths, her weaknesses, as well as recommended modules and captain skills so you can get the most out of this ship. One other thing, though, to keep in mind is because this is a preview, anything about the ship that I say is still subject to change, so do keep that in mind and make sure that when the ship is finally released that you double check everything to make sure everything is still the same as when I first previewed it. Anyways, without much further hesitation, let's get going. So, the Molotov. She looks like a Kirov. She has what appears to be the same size guns as the Kirov, but the Molotov is a little bit different. First up, she's a tier up. She's at tier 6, while the Kirov's down at tier 5. And compared to the other tier 6 Russian cruiser, the Bedioni, the Molotov has slightly less HP and significantly less armor. So, what's the redeeming trait of the Molotov, and why is a tier 5 ship up at tier 6? Well, it has a lot to do with the fact that the Molotov packs these 180mm 57 caliber guns. These guns, which in the port view says a reload time of 13 seconds, in game it's about 12.5 seconds, so it's a little bit longer in the port view, but in game it's 12.5 seconds for a reload. And these are the same guns that are carried by the tier 9 Russian cruiser, the Dimitri Donskoi. So basically what you have is a slightly better tier 5 hull, but packing tier 980mm guns. And these guns are phenomenal in terms of their rate of fire. It's really good. The dispersion is really good. In terms of damage, their HE damage and the AP damage are both very, very good, especially at tier 6. The 180mm guns on the Molotov, when you compare them to the 152mm guns on the Bedioni, you'll see that the Bedioni fires faster, with slightly worse dispersion, but significantly worse damage. In terms of HE damage, only 2200. In terms of AP damage, only 3300 with a 12% chance of fire. If you look at the Molotov, what you're going to get, and this is again with the 3% Demolitions Expert skill, is you have 13-second reload time, which is a bit longer. Max HE damage is a bit higher at 2500. The base fire chance is 13%, but AP damage is up at 4400, and this is very, very, very good damage for a cruiser gun at tier 6, which means that when you're fighting with the Molotov, you can use the HE to set fires and then swap over to AP to get nice solid damage hits. If you're fighting other cruisers, then AP can be pretty devastating, especially because if you look at the dispersion, it's actually very, very good as well once you equip the module on it. So that's only 130 meter dispersion. This is the thing that makes the Molotov shine, the guns. And in terms of main battery range, it's 15.5 kilometers. Shelf flight time is just a touch under 8.5 seconds. So with this ship, you can stay at range and fight. However, like I mentioned earlier, you're still, taking a tier 5 hull into basically a tier 6 battle. HP is less, your armor's less, so you can't really be anywhere near the front lines. And that's the thing about the Molotov. She's a very, very, very demanding ship in terms of how you position yourself and how aware you are of your surroundings. She does have torpedoes. She's got 2 of these triple 533mm torpedoes. The range is only 4 kilometers. They're really, really fast. They go 65 knots. In terms of damage, they're like many of the other Russian torpedoes, 14,400. The chances of you using these torpedoes on the Molotov is actually really, really low. If you get into a situation where you really need to use these torpedoes, you're in trouble in the ship. Although she does kind of have one of those sort of last, right before you get sunk kind of weapons. So it could be useful in very, very few situations, although I think if you play this ship correctly, this is not a weapon you're going to be using much. The Molotov's AA is a bit of a mixed bag. She's got a little bit of everything. The 12.7mm machine gun, she's got some 37mm, 45mm, and some 100mm guns. However, if you look at their range, the 100mm go to 3.5, the 45 go to 2.5, the 37 go to 2.0, and the machine guns have 1.2 kilometer range. These are pretty terrible ranges. That means the Molotov's AA suite is really designed to defend itself. And that's it. It's not really meant to protect anything. You take defensive fire to protect yourself. And that's about it. The Molotov's maneuverability is where there's a lot of pretty curious traits there. She's really, really fast. Her top speed of 36 knots puts her into some of the slower destroyer category speeds. And that means that if you run into the ship and as a destroyer, especially if you're a little bit in a slow destroyer, you're going to have trouble running away from a Molotov. So this cruiser can actually hound you and pepper you with shots. If you throw on a speed flag, the Molotov will go even faster. However, with the great speed, she is, of course, like many other Russian cruisers, sluggish as hell. An 860-meter turn radius with a 6.3-second rudder shift time after you equip a module. So this ship doesn't really turn all that well. However, she is super fast. The speed is a bit of a double-edged sword. At times, I really like her speed. She can get from point A to point B very, very quickly, and you can relocate around the battlefield in no time at all, really. However, because the Molotov is a very, very positionally demanding ship, and she demands that you're always in the right place, a little bit behind your sort of front lines, letting supporting fire, the speed can actually get you into trouble. You can actually be sometimes unconsciously going too fast and then all of a sudden find yourself caught in the front. And of course, once you get caught in the front with the ship, you are in for a world of pain, as she really doesn't have the armor or the maneuverability to get out of the way fast enough. The Molotov with the concealment expert and camouflage does get decent concealment. Surface detectability drops to 11.2 kilometers. Detectability by air is 6.6, which is reasonable for a cruiser. However, again, your main job is to hang further back, be behind the front lines, and lend supporting fire, whether that is HE on battleships and setting fires, using your HE to and your superior arcs really to hit destroyers that are trying to screen the enemy team's battleships, and really deal with anything that's trying to rush your team down. So that's kind of the Molotov's role. And again, very, very important to keep in mind that if you're planning to get the ship, that you yourself as a player have to have enough skill to maintain very, very good situational awareness. Otherwise, the ship is not going to be for you. In terms of recommended modules, I would still say get main battery modification 1 on the first slot, get gunfire control system modification 1 on the second slot, get the propulsion modification if you don't plan to get last stand. If you plan to get last stand, then obviously you can opt for damage control modification 1. And of course on the last one, get steering gears mod 2. In terms of captain skills, I would say you can go for the situational awareness on the first slot, go with last stand on the second. You can get vigilance on the third one, namely because, again, the ship doesn't really turn that well, so any extra warning you get for torpedoes is going to help you. Get demo expert on the fourth row because this ship is absolutely in love with setting fires, and especially at the tiers that you're going to be playing at, this demolition expert coupled with your basically tier 9 cruiser guns is going to set a lot of fires and really drive a lot of battleships crazy. Then of course on the fourth row, get concealment expert, and then once you get all these initial 15 skills, for the next couple of points you can probably get expert marksman and basics of survivability as your other skills. Of course, you can also offer things like basic firing training if you want to slightly improve your AA, or if you really prefer, you can also get incoming fire alert. Those are all your choices. Once you get past the initial sort of 15 skills, the rest are really up to you and your own individual playstyles. Anyway, so let's take a look at how the Molotov performs in battle. Alright, so tier 7 battle in a Molotov on the Trident map. And one of the very, very first things that I've learned to do with the Molotov is do not go full speed. At the beginning of the battle, when you're playing a Molotov, it's actually better to go about half, maybe 3/4 speed, and watch where your team is going. And the big reason for this is because, like I mentioned before, the Molotov is an incredibly fast ship. And one of the big problems with going full speed is you end up getting to a section of the map going, I'm here, and your team hasn't even caught up yet, and they're way behind you because you go incredibly fast. You can keep pace with their destroyers, but guess what? When the enemy team has a choice to shoot destroyers or you, and you're the frontline target, they're going to shoot you because you're big, you don't maneuver very well, and your armor is paper. So here's what you see me doing right here is I'm just half speed, taking a look at where my team is going, taking a look and trying to pay attention to where the enemy team is going. One other thing is I generally try not to fight battleships straight up in a Molotov. Again, the paper armor doesn't really help when you're facing, especially tier 7 to 8 battleships where they're packing 406 and 410 millimeter guns. You don't want to be eating shells from those battleships. So instead what I'm looking at is, hey look, On the 3 line, they look like a destroyer and 2 cruisers, and the early indication seems to be that at least some of their battleships are heading towards the 7, 8, 9 lines. Okay, best thing to do is not to go over there where the battleships are, and instead turn around and go deal with the cruisers and the destroyers. So now after deciding where I'm actually going to start heading and what I'm going to decide to actually start fighting, I'm going to slowly increase speed to full, and then the next thing you're going to see me do is you'll see me sort of pull up behind some of the other ships on my team. Other cruisers, other battleships, let them sort of go a little bit ahead of me, and I'll go sort of to the back. And this allows the Molotov to stay reasonably safe, and it's really, really important when you're playing the Molotov not to be that frontline ship. It is better to be that supporting ship where your positioning is essential. The speed, and here's where the speed is a good thing, is if you are actually at the back, and let's say you sail on the outer edge behind your team, the extra speed is going to come in handy, because what it's going to allow you to do is sort of keep pace with them, especially if they're slower battleships. As you can tell, the enemy team over here, they sent, I think, a Königsberg and an Aoba. Not a good place to be for 2 cruisers against this much firepower. That Aoba is just getting focused really, really, really hard. Going back to the other thing, and the thing that makes the Molotov special is the guns. 180mm armor piercing, especially ones that fire every 12.5 seconds. Especially when you're engaging cruisers, it is a huge advantage. You're simply going to get out a salvo faster than the other ships. And when you do finally hit them in the Citadel with 180mm armor piercing, it still hurts a hell of a lot. As this Königsberg very, very quickly is going to find out, as I deal with the Aoba, which I used HE on because the Aoba is angled, but realizing the Königsberg might go broadside, I'd switched over to AP ahead of time, and there you go, double Citadel, and 1 target hit for 10,000 damage. Königsberg is in trouble. Loses the engine, slows down dramatically, so my second salvo was a little bit too much in terms of lead, so only managed 1 Citadel there, but by this point in time, the Königsberg is in deep trouble. This third salvo should have actually hit better, except somehow no citadels at all, 4 target hits, only doing 2,000 damage, so I don't actually get the kill. Had that salvo actually citadeled, that would have been mine. Anyhow, so again, take a look at my position on the mini-map, and you'll see how I am actually a little bit further behind my battleship. I'm again in that supporting position. One thing I would strongly recommend when you're playing the Molotov is constantly take a look at your minimap. Have a constant eye on that. Know exactly where you are, know where the islands are, and try to stay out of trouble. In a lot of Molotov battles that I play, what I found is that if I screw up on my positioning, I get punished heavily. If I don't screw up on the positioning, I can run a whole battle, do a lot of damage, and end up taking very, very minimal damage. Enemy Atlanta at range, and you can tell that it's not that hard to hit stuff at 13, especially if it's a cruiser battleship sized target. At 13 kilometers, shell flight time is only about 7 seconds, so things aren't that hard to hit. Destroyers are still a challenge, however, if destroyers do get close, you do have the firepower to deal with them. Again, because you have 180mm high explosive, they do hurt destroyers quite a bit more than if you only had 152mm guns. By this point in time, the enemy team is already in trouble, even though, in terms of just sheer numbers of ships lost, they've only lost 2 extra ships. Their position is just terrible right now. They've got the few ships on my side that are coming down hard on the 3-4 line. My team is holding them right now on the 7-8, and basically what's going to end up happening is we're going to push down, we're going to sweep and clear everything on our end, and then essentially pincer them in. We might not be shooting at them directly, but just us being here is going to start to change things for them. They're going to start having to send ships back to cap, they're going to have to start to react, and so the enemy team right now, the Nagato, the Omaha, all these ships, they're going to have to deal with now stuff shooting at them from 2 different sides. And for a team, if you get pincered, the chances of you getting out of that pincer alive, not really all that great. Almost would have had this Omaha too. I could have had a crack in this game now that I think about it. Almost had this Omaha, but nope. Somebody just 10 HP, managed to secure it. So, oh well, what can you do? Anyways, I'm looking at the planes, and I'm like, the fighters are down here. Enemy team is pincered in on the other side. My guess is, my guess was that the carrier was probably going to be hiding behind that bean-shaped island around I6, I7, and yeah, the carrier was hiding behind there. So before I get there, I'm going to engage Miyoko first, and the Miyoko is tier 7 cruiser, 203mm guns, dangerous target. But you're going to see how the extra little bit of rate of fire, the fact that I reload a little bit faster, is going to give me a slight edge when I have to deal with this Japanese cruiser. I'm of course also using my speed to continue heading towards the carrier, because my hope is eventually if I can kill the cruiser, I can turn around and kill the carrier, and that's a lot of extra damage. As you can tell, the Molotov is incredibly fast. I am pretty much keeping pace with this Mahan over here, and that tells you that if you're in a destroyer that's not super fast and a Molotov decides to chase you, you are going to be in trouble. The other advantage, of course, is that when you are able to sort of take off with your destroyers, you can keep pace with them rather easily, compared to some other cruisers where if you have like 32, 33 knot speed, you're not going to be able to keep up with your destroyers all that well. As you can tell, that fast reload is playing its role here. 2 quick salvos into this Miyoko, a couple of Citadel hits. Miyoko gets off a salvo, but there goes another one, and it hurts. Broadside cruiser against Molotov, those 180mm armor-piercing shells into your Citadel is definitely going to do its work. Rate of fire, again, like I mentioned before, very, very helpful. You just get a reload just a bit faster than the other cruiser, which means against other cruisers, even when they tried angling, every time they want to swing out and get guns out, I can have a salvo, and then by the time they recover, I can have another salvo. So it's a very, very important thing to have. Ranger trying to run away, but it's still a big sluggish carrier, and so this game's pretty much done. I'm going to come around this corner, see that the Ranger actually is beached, and put shells right into the Citadel area, and I'm going to be the one to actually get this kill, so yes. There you go, 2 Citadel, 7 hits, good damage there, 11,000, and before the team, the 2 destroyers on my team can actually finish them off, I am going to put a bunch more hits into the Citadel. Kill secured. 2 final things to talk about before I wrap this whole thing up, which is the torpedoes on the Molotov. Out of all the battles I've played with the Molotov, I think I've maybe had to use it once, and it was when I had a Japanese cruiser sort of, we're playing sort of peekaboo behind islands with each other, and we're using the torpedoes. And that's like the only time I used it. Other than that, in the most sort of typical games playing the Molotov, you will just never use your torpedoes, so don't even really think about them. Guns first, only in desperate situations, pull out those torpedoes. AA is pretty terrible. I had these Ranger dive bombers over my head. Without defensive fire enabled, I think I managed to shoot down 1. However, if I had defensive AA, I think I could have shot down maybe a few more, although I think defensive fire is primarily for defending yourself against enemy air attack. Alright, so that pretty much wraps it up in terms of everything I managed to do in this battle. Time to answer that million-dollar question: should you buy the Molotov, and is she a good ship? I think the Molotov can be a very, very good ship if she is put in the right hands. If you're someone who is able to maintain a very, very good amount of situational awareness, you know exactly where your ship is in relation to your team, and you know how to exploit the enemy team movements, your own team movements, as well as the terrain to your advantage, I think the Molotov is an excellent ship. Her guns can do a lot of damage, and she can really, really output some pain onto the enemy team. However, if you are not very good with that, I think it might still be a decent idea to maybe pass on the ship, or maybe just play the Kirov first to get a sense of how the Russian cruisers play. Anyways, folks, have a good one. If you got any questions, do leave those in the comment section below. Take care, and I'll talk to all of you again soon.